would like to take a moment as the civil war in South Sudan just is on the brink of beginning. Um, it has started, really. You can't deny that it hasn't. But just looking at the way things are laid out here, Salvatore Kiir and his forces uh, control all the Dinka areas, and the Nur areas have all rebelled and gone over to the rebel movement. And the other, in the southwest, the Azan people and the smaller tribes in South Sudan uh, are sort of on the sidelines. And you see this pitched battle between the Dinka and the Nur. And on the face of it, the Dinka have this overwhelming advantage. They have 5 million people, the biggest single ethnic group in South Sudan. But, the Nur are 3 million in total. And not all of them are in South Sudan. I mean, they have a huge part of Ethiopia, the Benishangul Gumuz state in Ethiopia, where they're the majority. And so they have this whole other area where they can rearm and get supplies and weapons that the Dinka forces who are in control of the South Sudanese government, they can't even go there. It's another country. So this battle, it's going to cross international borders. It's going to cross international, intertribal lines. Spread. Will the North get involved? Try to take advantage of this? Will there's other Luo groups. In northern Uganda. You got the Lord's Resistance Army. Hiding out in the Central African Republic. Maybe they'll decide to take advantage of the chaos. You don't know. I mean, and the chaos is just beginning. I mean, right now it's just Dinka versus Nur. But I mean, you look at Somalia, where it began as Daru versus Hawiye, and then it was different parts of Hawiye versus Hawiye. Then there was the Harab, who broke off to sort of establish themselves, and then the Harab broke into the Habu-Gadir and the Abga fighting each other, and then it just completely dissolved into warlords ruling little fiefdoms, all over the country until it just completely dissolved into this neo-feudal mess of little lords, ruling these little, like a neighborhood. And it's on the same trajectory. I mean, you can see how different little groups could just break off from the main branch. If the Dinka don't, if the Dinka win, then who's to say the Dinka will stay together? All of a sudden there's this big pie that's up for grabs, and they've got it. So now which clan of the Dinka will rule? Maybe then the Dinka will split, and then it'll be the Baragazal Dinka versus the Northern Dinka. Or there's no end to this civil war. And a king of the hill tribal conflict situation, there's no winner, really. I mean, it just gets worse the longer it goes on, and then the longer it goes on, you get these radical solutions that start being proposed. It's like, in Somalia with Al-Shabaab and, Al-Qaeda. I mean, that was a solution that was proposed originally to the tribal chaos. I mean, there was the United Islamic Courts who, that was this great non-tribal alternative, and then that was invaded by Ethiopia and with Western air support, and then it collapsed. And then the most radical, extreme branch of that, Al-Shabaab, who were the only ones who stayed in the country. Everybody else fled. They fled to Asmara and Djibouti, and then the Al-Shabaab stayed, and they took over most of the country. At one point they were ruling, I think, 40% of the Somali, landmass. And then, they've only recently lost some ground thanks to this massive, technically illegal international coalition who's occupied half the country to prop up the very weak government forces. And I mean, the government's making slow strides, but you just think like, what if they hadn't done any of this? What if they just backed off? After the ID'd and everybody took over the country. What if they say, well, let's just relax and put a country back together, or didn't rebel against Mohammed Sibare, or whatever. I mean, it's just there isn't really a winner in this situation. It's just more chaos, chaos upon chaos, and the it's like when you unleash, it's like Pandora's box. You open it up, and all these evils escape, out into they just go around killing people and looting and raping and burning and stealing, and everything's just. And once you open that box, there's no putting everything back in the box. The putting everything back in the box is so hard. It seems that it's so easy to open the Pandora's box of this sort of tribal war where everything just sort of falls apart, but it's one of those situations where you can see that South Sudan just doesn't, and you can see it. They don't want to go down this road, but it's like they have to. Now that the gauntlet has been thrown down, there's no going back. The Nuer have challenged the Dinka, and the Dinka of Sever, they've excommunicated the Nuer. They're killing them in the capital. They've been completely excised from power. And the Nuer, in that situation, I mean, they have no, and how do you do a compromise? How do you end this conflict? I mean, do the Nuer surrender and just not have power at all in the new state? Or do the Dinka surrender and go back and walk back and look weak? That's the thing. They would look weak. Now it's like they surrender. They give the Nuer their power back. So there's no solution to this problem other than people just accepting this massive loss of faith and walking back all of the, quite strong declarations they've likely made to their supporters, and going to this new position, basically of status quo, going back to the way things were, which obviously wasn't something they were happy with since they started the civil war over. It's not something people do lightly. So how to put all the evils back in the box? Because the evils are out right now. All the evils in Pandora's box are out, and they're going to wreak unholy hell on South Sudan. I mean, South Sudan is just going to burn, for maybe decades, if it doesn't get back in, put all the evils back in the box and go back to the status quo and make this like a bad dream, But how? The leaders of South Sudan, they've made no indication that they are prepared to go back to the status quo, to make any concessions. So I think we're going to see some very, very, very bad times, a la Somalia in the early 90s in South Sudan, and I fear for them. I really do. I really do a lot.